Today on Unity Motorsports Garage, we're going to talk about how nitrous doesn't blow up engines. People do. Stick around. It's hard to believe in nearly my 300 videos that I have put out that I have not done one strictly dedicated to nitrous. Well, that changes today. We're going to talk about the do's and the don'ts, my experience with it, and how it can save you a bunch of trouble. The idea of nitrous is not necessarily reinventing the wheel. It's all about injecting more oxygen into the cylinder so that you can put additional fuel in the engine to make more power. Now, when you think about this, the air that we breathe normally only contains around maybe 21 to 20% oxygen. And that begs the question, how come not just inject pure oxygen into the engine? Good question. It's volatile, very volatile. Meaning that if you were to inject pure oxygen in it, you have fuel in the intake and the hot spots inside the intake, it would just blow the intake completely off the engine. Nitrous, on the other hand, is completely different. Nitrous is composed of 2 nitrogen molecules and 1 oxygen. But something special happens when you get around 575 degrees thereabouts. That means that the nitrogen separates, or it degrades from the oxygen molecule, allowing the oxygen to make extra power. The history of nitrous oxide is actually pretty interesting. It was originally developed a long time ago for the medical field, and to my knowledge, the first use of it in an internal combustion engine came in World War II. And the German Luftwaffe and the RAF both used nitrous oxide in their fighter planes to try to gain air superiority. A little bit higher ceiling where the planes could actually get to, and faster cruise speed. All of this played into the equation. So it's interesting that its first use in internal combustion engines was actually in war. But fast forward another 15, 20 years in the hot rodding community. Then that's when you started seeing nitrous kits showing up at the drag strip. Now, back in these days, they were very crude and tuning was non-existent. I mean, and there was a lot of failures, of course, you can imagine that. But in my era, growing up in the 1980s and 1990s, nitrous was the premier power adder of choice. And the reason for that was it was cost and the availability of it. Now, there were cars out there that had Paxton superchargers or Vortex or maybe even a Kenny Bell, so on and so forth. And turbo cars, they were non-existent back then, with the exception of the Grand National and maybe the twin turbo 300ZX. But that's another topic. But I would say the ratio to power adders, you know, being forced induction versus nitrous, was probably 100 to 1 back in those days. Everybody ran nitrous. It's cheap and easy. Sorry I got off the rails and started talking about everything but the do's and don'ts, but it's important to know what you're working with. So let's talk about nitrous oxide and the do's and don'ts. First of all, nitrous oxide is non-flammable. It needs a fuel source in order to do its magic. You can actually take a lighter in front of nitrous and it will put it out. You know, so that's the number one myth, you know, nitrous explodes. No, not really. Now, it will explode if you keep a bottle heater on it in the trunk of your car or leave it in your car in the middle of summer. The pressure inside the bottle will get so high and it will blow the burst panel and you're going to have problems. It'll blow the entire back of the car apart. So, when you first buy your nitrous kit, you're all excited. You're ready to go conquer the world. And I was the type of person, like, all motor, you know, bottles for sissies, blah, blah, blah. That's all fine and dandy until you see tail lights for the first time of somebody spraying on you. And then once you drive or ride in a nitrous car, that dynamic of being like Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, just coming alive at the flick of a switch, there's nothing like it. There is nothing like it. It is magical. And you will become addicted to nitrous for life, or at least I did. So, do's and don'ts, back on that. You know, when you buy your first nitrous kit, it comes as a base kit. There's no bottle heater, there's no purge valves, none of that stuff is in there. No bottle, quarter turn ball valves, none of that stuff is in the kit. And we're going to get into that stuff, you know, and the first instinct is just put the kit on it, what you have, and get out and go hammer on it. Well, you need a micro switch for wide open throttle. You know, don't be this guy. Back in the day, everybody ran their nitrous off of the button. And that works. It works until you hit that button at the wrong time and then you see a nitrous backfire. Not a good thing. Normally, your intake manifold is going to be in multiple pieces. Or you hit the rev limiter and the nitrous is still spraying. That's going to cause major problems. That is a no-no. So you need a micro switch and you need some sort of window switch that activates in a certain RPM range, because you do not want to activate the nitrous too low of RPM, because that is where all of the torque is being hit, and if you're not careful, it will cause it to backfire, once again, leaving pieces on the ground. If something was to break in your driveline and the engine spins astronomical RPMs, you want to have the window switch on there to keep it from cutting. It could cut the nitrous off to keep it from damaging the engine. Does that make sense? So the next thing we're going to talk about is bottle heaters. Now, back in the day, everybody, and myself included, used a torch to heat the bottle. And why do you need to do that? Well, you can have a full nitrous bottle and the bottle pressure is still down if the bottle is cold. The bottle temperature needs to be somewhere in the mid-90s, thereabouts, to get the bottle pressure around 900 psi. And the bottle pressure is everything to a nitrous kit. It's what determines your air-fuel ratio. You know, of course, the more bottle pressure you have, meaning the leaner your air-fuel ratio is going to be for a given jet size, the less amount of bottle pressure you have is going to richen the mixture up. Something to think about. Some people think that you need to have really high bottle pressures, like 1,000 psi, to get it to hit hard. Well, you need to learn a little bit about pressure decay. It's like letting air out of a balloon. It blows really hard right off the bat, and then it just flattens out. So where you need your nitrous bottle pressure is somewhere between 850 and 900-ish. Now, your kit may have different recommendations, but that's a ballpark area. Bottle heaters have come so far throughout the years. Back in the day, like I said, no one really had bottle heaters. But now you can have a bottle heater on there to get the bottle pressure where you want it, disconnect it, turn it off, have it on a thermostat to where it automatically cuts off. And even in Clark, you know, the station wagon that Mike and I race, he's got it set up to where he can run it off of a Milwaukee battery, which is really cool. That way, if we're in the staging lanes and the bottle pressure is a little bit low, can walk around, open the hatch, plug in the battery for about a minute or two, and the bottle pressure is right back up. Bottle pressure is very important. You will see people with torches typically when it starts getting colder outside, because the bottle will cool off pretty rapid as a matter of fact. So you're sitting in the staging lanes and someone oils down the track and you're like the next pair to go. All of a sudden you're sitting there 30 minutes before you get to make your run. You will see people run and grab a torch to torch that bottle to get the bottle pressure back up. So it's best just to go ahead and have a heater on the bottle so that you can make the necessary changes without having to worry about using a torch. Okay, so it's intermission time. I don't normally do this, but I'm asking you for a huge favor. I got a buddy of mine, his name's Tim Jacobson. He has a YouTube channel called Indecisive Garage. Now he's wanting to race at the AHRA No Name Nationals this coming weekend, as a matter of fact. The catch is, it's a YouTube content creator's drag race, and you have to have 500 subs in order to be able to race at this event. I think he, at this point, me filming this, is about 95 subs away. So do me a huge favor, please go over, and I'll put a link to it up here in the corners for you to go to his channel, give him a sub so that he can go to Missouri and race the No Name Nationals. Since I'm not going to be there, since Casper is down for the count waiting on the converter to get fixed, that way he can go represent the first John Cope CASPER-MATIC transmission in his Lightning clone. Be really cool. Thank you. Let's get back talking about nitrous. At the beginning of the video, I made the claim that nitrous doesn't blow up engines, people do. What does that mean, Andy? Well, you get your nitrous kit, and it comes with specified pills or jets for a given amount of horsepower. And most basic kits are like 75, 100, 125, 150, so on and so forth. Well, the first time you ever spray it, you think, oh, I'm only going to spray 75 shot. Well, you put the 75 shot jets in it, you're like, man, that feels good. And then you think, well, I can go ahead and bump it up to 100 or 125 shot, no problems. And typically you can get away with that. But you got to pay the piper at some point, and what ends up happening is it's not necessarily that the engine can't handle it. You run out of fuel system. You got to be able to deliver enough fuel for the amount of nitrous that you're putting to the engine so that you can make that power reliable. So when you run out of fuel pump, it goes lean, melts down the engine. It's the nitrous kit's fault, always. I mean, that's the way it's been for years and years and years, and that's not the truth. It's your fault because you got greedy. Now, you're spraying a $150, pretty consistent. Well, what you need to start thinking about at this point in the game is changing spark plugs, okay? Normally, I run auto lights and everything that's all motor. That's what Casper has in it when on all motor. Got NGK 9-9 plugs for the nitrous. Why do you switch brands? Well, the auto lights are harder to read. When you're spraying nitrous and spraying fair amounts of quantity of it, you need to be able to read the spark plug, and the NGK plugs are the way to go. The core on it, the cadmium, you can read it, you can see your timing mark, you can see if you're getting peppering on the porcelain. That's all important things to know. Always, when you get about $150, you need to start running at least one step colder on your plugs, but also switch to like an NGK. You'll be happy in the long run. Another thing we're going to talk about is the fuel that you're using. Once you start getting up into the upper power ranges of nitrous, you need to be running really high octane fuel. Yeah, you can probably do 125, 150 shot on a stock engine, maybe with 93 octane, but anything past that, you really need to be looking at 100 octane plus. Now, in the case of Casper, I'm running a standalone fuel system in it to where I can run VP C23 in the standalone tank and run 93 out of the regular fuel cell. That's a good combination to run. People have often asked me about running E85. My experience with running E85 and nitrous is not a good one. In fact, in the 4.6 motor, that's basically the only time that I've melted spark plugs is trying to run E85 on it. And the engine did not like it, and I wound up having to pull the engine apart because it crushed the ringland on the piston. The E85 runs so clean, when you try to read the plug, it looks like it came out of the box. There's nothing there to read. There's no carbon per se, and that's problematic because it'll look really good all of a sudden, and then it'll still look good and you have a melted down engine. That's something you don't want. You want to be able to see signs that the motor is not happy before you hurt it. Now this may seem pretty obvious, okay, but back in my day, you just rushed to put that nitrous kit on it, you got it on the button. Well, the nitrous bottle is just laying in the floorboard in the back seat there. Not good. Make sure that your bottle is actually mounted secure, because if you're in an accident, that bottle, if it hits the valve, it's going to turn into a missile if it knocks it off. You may be tempted to be this guy and do what I did 20 some years ago and ride around with a nitrous bottle so I could just reach back there and turn it on and turn it off. Don't do that. You know, we learn as we do this stuff, and I'm saying that that's not a good way to go. You know, have it mounted securely to the floor so that if you are in an accident, that bottle is not going to move. Now in Casper, I'm going to have it mounted right here. That way I can turn it on and turn it off from inside the cab. And I have a quarter turn ball valve, which leads me to my next point, purge valves. Everybody thinks that purge valves are just for show. You see them on the start line purging that nitrous kit, and you see the big plume of nitrous go out. Jason Black is the best at purging nitrous, by the way. Check this little clip out. You see what I'm talking about, right? But anyways, purging actually does a couple different things. One, it helps you get your bottle pressure where you actually need it. If you've got it too high, you want to purge it down to where you want to launch at. And two, it gets rid of any air that's in the system between the bottle and the solenoid. But there's also another reason, and it's probably the most important reason, is after you've made your run, you cut your nitrous kit off, you purge the nitrous to keep the pressure off of the solenoid. Now, back in the early days, before I had a purge valve, I would go out there with a little 9/16 wrench, crack the line open, let the nitrous come out until it was clear, crack it back down, then I was ready to make a run. But the whole point of it is, you do not want nitrous pressure constantly on your solenoids, because solenoids can leak. Well, you might think, well, what's the big deal with that? Well, if you pull up to the pits and you park and you have, 900 PSI on the backside of that solenoid, and then it slowly leaks that nitrous into the engine, when you go to crank that engine up, you're going to have a big backfire, and it's not going to be pretty. We have bent blades on carburetors, throttle blades. We've done all kinds of stuff over the years. So make sure you have a bottle valve. Make sure that it's turned off. Make sure you purge the nitrous off after you've made your run. I guess one of my final things that I want to talk about is actually buying your nitrous kit. You might be tempted to find something on Marketplace that you get a good deal, good used kit. You don't know any history on it, but man, I just got this thing for $100. It's got everything. The problem with that is, you don't know how many times that solenoid has been cycled, and you don't know if there's junk inside the plate or the nozzle, whatever the kind of kit that you're using. And that means it can be problems for you. So My recommendation is do not buy a used nitrous kit unless you know the history of it. That's very important, because that thing could be laying in the bottom of Johnny's shop over there getting dust and dirt inside the plate, and then he just cleaned it off and put it on Marketplace. Next thing you know, you put it on your car, and then your engine blows up. That's just the facts of life. So don't be that guy. Ask me how I know. I've been there, done that. If I do have something in question, it's not uncommon for us to actually take the plate off of the car and spray nitrous through the plate to make sure that we're getting even distribution, and make sure that none of the holes inside the orifices inside the spray bars are clogged up. That's kind of normal routine for me and Micah over a period of time. Well, I guess this is going to wrap this up. I mean, this is kind of like Nitrous Basics 101, you know, do's and don'ts. If you want me to do another in-depth video on tuning and so on and so forth, the difference between wet and dry kits and plates and foggers, leave it in the comments, because I could literally talk about this stuff all day. But I hope you got something from this, and if you're new to spraying nitrous, don't be afraid of it. Just be mindful and dot all of your I's and cross your T's to make sure that it does what it's supposed to do, and then at the end of the day, you're not left with a bucket of parts. So it's that simple. So until next time, this is Andy from Unity Motorsports Garage. I will catch you later.